This is the Oppo Reno 13 Pro, and it has some really top line spec, like a triple camera array, charging at 80 watts wired, 50 watts wireless charging, a 5800 mAh battery. So some really high end spec. But there's one major issue with the Oppo Reno 13 Pro. So let's start off by talking about that triple camera array on the back of the Reno 13 Pro, and it's made up of a 50 megapixel main lens, a 50 megapixel telephoto, an 8 megapixel ultra wide, and then the front facing sensor is again 50 megapixels. In fact, the front and the rear will both capture video at 4K 60 FPS. So there's no compromises in the camera system as a whole. You could argue the ultra wide at 8 megapixels is low, but overall the camera system is super impressive. But what's the production like? Well, I have to say, having used an Oppo Find X8 Pro now for a short while, this color science is lush. I absolutely love it. So what you get here is really good detailed photos from all of those various lenses. So what you're looking at here is really good real to life photos, but also give you a bit of punch in the color as well. You can of course add your own filters, your own styles, etc. to this, but we've just kept this as a purely natural tone, no vibrancy, no extra filters, etc. And the quality of the photos are really good. So main, ultra wide, telephoto photos all look really good. Night photos, again, not the nightest of night, but still look really good and really detailed. If we move on to video, front and rear, both again 4K 60. Again, the quality of both is very good. And I would say it's at that gap between that near flagship level is probably on a similar level to something like an S24 FE, or roughly around, say, the iPhone 16e as well, which gives a hint to something we're going to talk about later. But that's a breakdown of the camera systems on the Oppo Reno 13 Pro. However, how does it come and perform to things like OS and AI? So the AI, it's exactly the same as you get in the Find X8 Pro, which is sick. So this is not stripped back in any way, even though this is a mid to high level phone. So let's talk about that. So a couple of things to touch on here. You get enhanced clarity using AI, so you can take your old sort of duller looking photos or photos that may not have the same pop and add a bit of oomph to them and a bit of contrast and color to make them pop a bit more. If you move on from that to things like the AI writing tools, you can take any text that you've either created or you've pulled from the internet, and you can either summarize it, adjust it, expand on it, whatever you want within the Notes app on the Reno 13 Pro. But there's one really cool option that exists in the Find X8 Pro that's found its way here, and that's the toolbox that lives on the side. So depending on where you are within your phone, it will adjust. So for example, if you're in the messaging app and you're just messaging somebody about something and you want to make it sound a bit more funky or cooler or a bit more professional, if it's your boss, you can pull out from the right, and again, you will get a breakdown here using AI Writer. But then if you were to go on the web, it'll actually offer you a different level, things like AI Summary, AI Speak. So it adjusts its AI functions and operations based on where you are within the phone, which is really cool and a nice little touch that I really like. Makes it super simple and relevant to where you are in the phone. But there's one other thing. The processor that lives inside the Reno 13 Pro has to be powerful to power not only those triple cameras and that 4K video and the AI tools, but also the AI software, which is running Android 15 and Color OS 15, and that processor is the MediaTek Dimensity 8350. The performance of the 8350 is pretty good compared to the Reno 12 Pro from last year, so you get a good enough bump in the processor and the raw power and the GPU. And you see this in things like running a multimodal action on Google Gemini. What you find here is response is super quick. There's not much of a delay, but it can handle really detailed tasks and actions that you want to do through AI that's built on the device, as well as Google Gemini. Moving on from that, if you're looking at just things like just gaming, things like Call of Duty, for example, you can pop this into the performance or gaming mode, whatever you want to call it, and you can achieve really high level FPS, and it runs super smooth. There is no real issue with things like latency or drop off in frame rates, etc. It runs very well. And I would say in general, the performance as a whole is excellent. If you were then to run it through just normal benchmark to see how it performs as a whole, again, it performs well for a phone in this particular category. It's not at that flagship level, but it does perform very well. And the other flagship-esque feature, I should say, is this phone actually has IP69 rating. Now, this is separate from the IP60 dust and water resistance. IP69 is against things like steam cleaning or steam or high pressure jets. Now you really see something really, really cool with the Reno 13 Pro, and that is if you were to pop this in water and then you wanted to photograph underwater, you actually can. So if you enable it through the settings, you can enable underwater mode, pop it underwater. I don't know why you would want to, but it's pretty cool anyway. And you can snap a photo. What it does, it changes the UI from the touchscreen to a button-based UI, and that allows you to capture images and videos. Actually pretty sick, and it can handle 2 meters of water depth for 30 minutes as well, so no concerns. But then you're thinking, how do I get out of that mode? Well, if you hold down the power key, it will actually expel all of that excess water, and it takes around about 3 to 5 seconds to expel it, and then you're back into your normal operations. Pretty sick and really, really cool, especially that IP69 rating. So that big issue we mentioned to start this video, well, it's part of a few. Let's touch on very, very quickly. So the 13 Pro gives you 80 watts of wired, 50 watts of wireless charging, but you don't get a plug of either in the box. So if you wanted to get a plug, you're shelling out anywhere between 25 to 40 pounds, euros or dollars for that plug that will allow you to achieve those charging speeds. No plug seems to be a thing now constantly, but they still offer really high charging rates, which is really weird. The other bit, which is slightly controversial, is the price. And that is for me the biggest issue. Essentially what you have here is a phone that costs around 649 pounds, euros or dollars, which on the face of it, based on what we've covered in this review, sounds like a reasonable cost. However, this is directly linked to the processor. So this runs a Dimensity 8350 processor. If you compare it to something like a Poco X7 Pro, that runs a Dimensity 8400 processor, which actually is overall slightly more powerful, but that phone costs £399. If you look on the other side, you've got the OnePlus 13R, which runs a Snapdragon 8 Gen 3, which is significantly more powerful than this Dimensity 8350. And this is where I think the biggest issue with the Reno 13 Pro lies. It's a very, very good phone that could have been just that little bit more, or it could have been cheaper. If this was $499, smash it out of the park. Brilliant buy, amazing. As it's $649, I feel like it should have had one of those adjustments that made it just that little bit better. The camera system is great, battery life's great, charging speed's great, OS runs really well, you get all the right lenses support. There's 3 years worth of software updates, which is good, not great, 5 years worth of security updates, but that processor, unfortunately, is a bit of a miss, and that price alongside it. However, if you ignore those 2 elements and you want a really, really good phone that does everything you'd want it to do in terms of performance, display, charging, etc., then the Reno 13 Pro may well be the right phone for you. But for us, I think it's a really good addition to that mid to high level at $649. Probably not the best option. How about you? What do you think of the Oppo Reno 13 Pro? Let us know in the comment section. To the next one, as always, we out.